Hello everyone, it's Daniel Kriegers here from the employment team at Chadwick Lawrence, preparing my first video on coronavirus as opposed to putting anything in writing, just because it's easier given the volume of questions that we've been answering as a team today. Also wanted to share with you some of the steps that we're taking internally at Chadwick Lawrence as part of our general planning. So just to start with a recap on self-isolation advice, the current position, which may well change over the next couple of days, is that those with a new continuous cough or high temperature are required to self-isolate for 7 days if they're the only individual in the household, or 14 days if somebody is living with them in the household. If an employee develops symptoms during self-isolation due to a family member, this may take them beyond 14 days, depending on when they develop their own symptoms. Now, those requirements are likely to extend to vulnerable adults within the next few days, irrespective of symptoms, with the suggestion being that they may be required to self-isolate for up to 12 weeks. Vulnerable adults are discussed later in this video. One interesting development or notable absence from the government advice is those returning from what were previously called high-risk areas. So initially, certain regions of northern Italy, South Korea, and China and Iran. There is conflicting advice at the moment on the website between the public health guidance for employees, employers and businesses on the one hand, and the stay-at-home guidance, which is on the website as well. The former advised on self-isolation for those returning from high-risk areas. There is a link to the high-risk countries, but that guidance has now been withdrawn. The latter guidance, the stay-at-home guidance, suggests that self-isolation is only necessary if certain symptoms are present. So we are currently following that guidance and having to risk assess anybody coming from abroad, maybe returning from holiday, and ultimately identifying whether we believe that they are fit to remain in the workplace. So moving on to pay during isolation, SSP is now payable where individuals are self-isolating but may not actually be unwell themselves. On the 13th of March, the statutory sick pay general coronavirus amendment regulations came into force, and that deems that a person is incapable of work where they are isolating themselves from other people in such a manner as to prevent infection or contamination with coronavirus disease, in accordance with guidance published by Public Health England, NHS National Services or Public Health Wales. SSP is now payable from day one, and those employers who have fewer than 250 employees will be reimbursed for up to 14 days of SSP. Interestingly, the new deemed incapable of work provisions, in our view, suggest that if we are confident somebody is displaying symptoms of the virus, so is meeting the requirements of the government's self-isolation position, employers should be requiring individuals to self-isolate and to be entitled to statutory sick pay. Previously, we did feel, prior to these regulations coming in, that it was a risk to send employees home, relying on our own interpretation of the position. Given the deemed provisions now, we think that if there is evidence that somebody has a continuous cough or has a high temperature, that they should be required to self-isolate. And whilst it does still present a risk, employers may wish to require an employee to remain self-isolated on SSP only. The position on company sick pay is another questionable issue. Our view has been that an employee who is self-isolating, not because they are unwell necessarily, but maybe because they are in a household which is under household quarantine, should not be entitled to company sick pay. The reason being that they are not themselves incapable of work through sickness or injury. Now, it does depend on the wording of the contract as to whether company sick pay will apply, and if somebody is genuinely unwell, it's likely the company sick pay provisions will kick in. Moving on to home working, it is an area that the government advised on very recently. They are encouraging employers wherever possible to find solutions to allow employees to work from home. And this has been a real focus of our planning at Chadwick Lawrence over the past couple of days. We have over 220 employees. We are trying to identify very quickly who can work from home, how our offices can remain operational to an extent. And the action planning has really started with how we set people up at home. So the IT infrastructure that is available, our IT guys have been fantastic in advising on our remote working environment, people's laptops, own computers, capabilities of working from home, any other equipment they need. From a practical perspective, you may want to think about monitoring of employees to ensure their productivity at home, how we contact them, and importantly, if, for example, the remote desktop environment goes down, how we contact employees to advise them of any updates, and that may mean a WhatsApp group, group text messaging, something of that nature. The most important planning that we've undertaken today is following the government identifying vulnerable categories of employee who are strongly advised to work from home. Those categories of vulnerable employee at the moment are individuals over 70, women who are pregnant, those under 70 with underlying health conditions, being any adult instructed to get a flu jab each year on medical grounds. This includes individuals with chronic long-term respiratory diseases such as asthma, COPD, emphysema or bronchitis, chronic heart disease, chronic kidney disease, chronic liver disease, chronic neurological conditions such as Parkinson's, motor neuron disease, multiple sclerosis and cerebral palsy, diabetes, spleen issues, a weakened immune system as a result of certain conditions, and being seriously overweight with a BMI of 40 and above. So we have come up with three categories of individual who may either be vulnerable themselves or have an association with a vulnerable person, with a view to identifying who needs to be accelerated in terms of getting them set up working from home. Category 1 is for those who suffer from those conditions themselves. Category 2 is for those who live with somebody who has one of those conditions. And Category 3 is for individuals who have some form of caring or regular contact with another individual who has those conditions. So what we have come up with now is an action plan which looks to accelerate working from home for those individuals to minimise the risk to those who are most vulnerable in our workplace. We expect that will be extended ultimately to other individuals, but we do need to operate our premises as well. Now, I appreciate this guidance may not apply in many workplaces, especially in manufacturing industries, face-to-face retail environments, but I have seen a lot of employers who have contacted us planning in the same way. Holidays has cropped up as an issue within that advice because there is an expectation that with home working coinciding with these government measures on self-isolation and reducing social contact, there will be an impact on productivity and workload. So a number of my clients are keen to ensure that during this time of expected lower productivity, annual leave entitlement is extinguished to an extent. What we don't want necessarily is in a few months' time, perhaps when we return to some sort of normality, employees having a significant amount of leave to take at the same time, as that will be another knock-on blow and effect for many businesses. So what some have quite rightly said is they would like employees to take a proportionate amount of leave while they are working at home, perhaps 2 days a month, depending on when the start of the holiday year is, and I think that is an excellent idea. We move on to the other significant issue of the day, unfortunately, which is reducing costs. Many businesses have seen a drop-off, or in some cases, unfortunately, a catastrophic drop-off in work as a result of the restrictions imposed by the government. The first question is generally around temporary layoff or short-time working, be that with consent or with a contractual entitlement. It is very rare to see layoff and short-time working in contracts nowadays, particularly for salaried employees, largely because of the change in bargaining power over the years. And many employees will simply not accept a contract, which can suddenly reduce their ability to earn with very little notice. If you, as an employer, do have a layoff or short-time working clause, that can be imposed fairly quickly. There is a small amount of statutory guarantee pay, currently £29 per day, which is payable for up to the first 5 days of layoff or short-time working. You do need to be aware that if employees have their hours reduced by over 50% for 4 weeks continuously, or 6 weeks out of any 13-week period, they will be entitled to treat themselves as redundant unless the work is ready and available after that point. If there is no such right, a number of clients have asked us about requesting employees take a period of unpaid leave, temporary pay cuts, reductions in hours, and commensurate reductions in pay as well. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for the cooperation of your workforce, particularly if it avoids or reduces the need to make compulsory redundancies. There are also other measures such as extinguishing annual leave where possible, dismissal of short-serving staff as a lower risk measure, headcount freezes, not replacing natural wastage, and looking at the removal of agency staff as a possibility. What I have been saying to clients throughout the day today is wait for the government's announcements on how they intend to protect businesses and improve economic activity going forwards. The Chancellor has announced a significant and quite unprecedented package of measures to try and protect businesses and employees as well. This includes £330 billion of access to a business interruption loan scheme of up to £5 million for SME businesses with no interest to pay in the first 6 months. And that is intended to be operational within the next week and will be attractive and necessary to many businesses in the UK. And there will be specific support for airlines and airports to be announced in the coming days. Support for insurance claims in the hospitality, leisure and retail sectors. A £25,000 grant for those in the HLR sectors for businesses with a rateable value of under £51,000. And irrespective of size, a business rates holiday to all in the HLR sector for 12 months. There will be a £10,000 grant for the very smallest of employers. And for individuals, lenders will be at least strongly encouraged to offer a 3-month mortgage holiday. The government has also announced that they will work with trade unions and business groups to develop further support measures for employees' incomes. The Chancellor did suggest that there will be further announcements in the coming days. And what I have been saying to our employer clients is, if at all possible, in advance of making sweeping cuts such as compulsory redundancies in circumstances where output may well pick up again in a few months' time, wait to see what these measures are over the next few days, if you can hold on, because there may be further initiatives announced in addition to those that I've already mentioned, which will protect income, improve cash flow going forwards, and ultimately protect jobs for all employees. So that is today's update. The only other thing to mention is that there is some excellent guidance on the gov.uk website, which is updated regularly. Businesses or anybody can sign up for updates from the government at any time, and they are published throughout the day, every day. There's advice on self-isolation, on reducing social contact, guidance on what happens if there is a suspected or confirmed case of coronavirus in the workplace. And as I say, that is updated regularly. That's all from me. I hope to provide further updates in the coming days. And as always, if there are any questions or queries arising out of this guidance, please just give one of the employment team a call or drop us an email. Thank you.